Hey gardeners, Candice here to chat all about hydrangeas. I'm going to give you a quick garden tour to show you the types of hydrangeas I have in my landscape, how easy, how great, and how low maintenance they are to grow in your garden. One of the most common questions we get asked about hydrangea is how to prune. When to prune? Do I need to prune in hydrangea? And the first step to answering that question is to decide what type of hydrangea you have. You need to identify it so that you can decide if that hydrangea blooms on old wood or new wood. Old wood, meaning that the flower buds are going to be coming on last year's stems, on last year's growth. New growth, or new wood, meaning that the flowers are going to come from this year's growth. So anything that comes up this spring is still going to be able to flower. I would say the hydrangea we get asked about the most is the big leaf hydrangea. And this hydrangea right here is a big leaf hydrangea, Hydrangea Macrophylla. A lot of people love these hydrangeas because they have very large blue or pink round flowers. They're beautiful. But the struggle with the big leaf hydrangea is that it blooms on old wood. So if we pan back here, you'll see that these stems coming up here are last year's stems. So there actually is some new growth coming from last year's stem, so that's a good sign. But you'll notice all of this new growth coming from the base, that is new growth that is not going to flower. It's not going to have any flower buds. So these particular hydrangeas have been in my garden. They came with the house I purchased, and I've lived here for 5 years, and they have not flowered once, unfortunately. Because if I want these to really have a good flower display, I need to provide more winter protection than what they get on the south side of my house here. So big leaf hydrangea, beautiful, but you can struggle if we have a hard winter and that old wood gets killed off. One of the hydrangeas I like even better is an oak leaf hydrangea, and you can see this one is just starting to leaf out here with those classic kind of oak shaped leaves. This one also blooms on old wood, but you'll notice I find it to be a lot more winter hardy and flower a lot more consistency on that older wood. If we're talking about pruning a hydrangea that blooms on old wood, we would want to do that pruning after it flowers. So after these oak leaf hydrangeas bloom in the summer, I could go ahead and prune them at that point if I wanted to. But to be honest, the only reason to prune would be if you were trying to maintain a smaller shape to that shrub. This one is a couple years old, still has plenty of space to grow. So I'm not going to prune this until I really need to control the shape or the size. So here's another look at that oak leaf just starting to emerge here in April. This next type of hydrangea is a panicle hydrangea. Excellent shrub, very winter hardy, really tough, easy to grow, and does not need much maintenance. What's different about a panicle hydrangea is that it blooms on new wood. So if I needed to, I could do a rejuvenation pruning, cut this entirely to the ground, and just off of that new growth that comes in the spring, I would still have flowers. Again, I'm only going to prune this if I need to. If the shape or the size is getting unruly, these can get pretty good sized. But in my case, these are only a couple years old, so I'm not going to do any pruning yet. You'll notice I have not pruned off the flowers from last season. That would be the only pruning that I'm going to do in my landscape. So I'm going to go back to where these leaves are leafing out, and I can just trim off those old flower heads. Otherwise, I am happy with the size of this, and I'm just going to keep letting it grow in this particular spot. If eventually it does get too big, again, I could do a rejuvenation pruning and go all the way to the ground, or I could start to eliminate some of the older, more thick branches and start to do a renewal pruning. Last but not least, we have the smooth hydrangea. This one is out at the end of my driveway. It does great out here. Smooth hydrangea, you may know very commonly a popular cultivar, Invincibelle, which is what this one is here. So you can see I also haven't pruned off last year's flowers, so I will prune those off. But otherwise, this is very similar to panicle and that it is going to bloom on new wood. So I could rejuvenate, prune this all the way to the ground if I needed to. But again, I'm happy with the size of this. I want to let it get larger in my landscape. So I'm not going to do any pruning besides removing those old spent flower heads. So those are your 4 main types of hydrangeas you might find in our Illinois landscape. You have your big leaf and your oak leaf, which flower on old wood, and you're going to prune after they flower in the summer. And you have your panicle and your smooth, which are going to flower on new wood, which you're going to prune in the late winter, early spring, before that new growth starts to come out. So hopefully you recognize some of these from your own landscape. And if you don't have any hydrangea in your landscape, I highly recommend trying them. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Facebook Live with the Horticulturists. We are the Horticulturists here to answer your gardening questions, and today is all about hydrangea, one of our favorite topics for sure. My name is Candice Hart. I'm the State Master Gardener Specialist for Illinois Extension, and if you joined early, you just saw me talking about some of the hydrangea in my garden, so very excited to talk about that today. I love to chat about any type of flower, whether it's an annual, a perennial, a flowering shrub. That's my favorite type of gardening topic, but luckily we have a couple of other great horticulturists with us and a special guest, so we're excited to get started. Kelly, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Alsop, and I am based out of Bloomington. I am a horticulture educator for University of Illinois Extension. My specialty within the team is integrated pest management. And I know you're thinking that I like to tell people how to kill bugs, but most of the time I'm teaching people how to conserve insects. So anything insect related is my passion. Ryan and we, if you've seen the show before, Ryan and I share a passion for vegetable gardening in our yards. And then I know he's the tree guy, but I'm loving those trees too.
And I'm Ryan Pankow, horticulture educator out of Champaign. And yes, Kelly, you are a tree lover and as much of a tree aficionado, I think, as the rest of us on this show. Like all of us love trees. So that's my main subject area that I dwell in is forestry, arboriculture, trees and shrubs, everything woody plants is what my first love in horticulture. But yes, I'm also a vegetable gardener like Kelly. Also like native plants quite a bit. You'll hear me talk about those quite a bit. So with that, I'll turn to our special guest today. Chris, would you mind introducing yourself to folks?
Certainly. I am super excited to be here today to talk hydrangeas and whatever else might be thrown our way. So my name is Chris Enroth. I'm a horticulture educator, and I live in Macomb, Illinois, and I serve McDonough, Warren, Henderson, and Knox counties. And so, Kelly, when you're talking about IPM and good bugs, bad bugs, I'm just picturing you posting like wanted posters and contracting out with the good bugs to kill all the bad bugs. So that's kind of where it went through my brain when you're like, yeah, we can hire the good guys to take care of the bad guys for us.
Train an army.
That's right. That's right.
Love it. Okay, well, if you guys have questions about hydrangeas or any kind of gardening topic, feel free to start adding those into the comments. We've already gotten a couple, so we'll definitely get to those as we go through today. But I think we want to kick it off with just going into some of the basics of hydrangeas in our Illinois landscape. Like I said, we love to chat about hydrangeas. A lot of times someone will ask us what we would recommend for a certain spot. And most of the time one of us is like, oh, this type of hydrangea or that type of hydrangea, because they're just so versatile and awesome plants. So excited to talk about them. And I think Kelly's going to kind of kick us off with some questions for our special guest.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Chris to describe some of the kinds of hydrangeas that we grow in our Illinois garden, and just add in maybe a few ID techniques.
Yeah, so I will kick off with my favorite. Maybe I'll start with my favorites first. And I really like oak leaf hydrangea. So that's Hydrangea quercifolia. Now, oak leaf hydrangea, I was first introduced to this one in Southern Illinois. When we say things are native, oak leaf hydrangea is not necessarily native to where I'm at in Central Illinois, but it grows here just fine. But I do recall seeing this down in Carbondale when I was down in school there, and I absolutely fell in love with this plant. I mean, just without even looking at the flowers, the leaf shape is amazing. If you can get one of good size, it has beautiful exfoliating bark. And some of just the straight species, so no hybridization, no cultivation going on, has some amazing fall color. But then you add in some of what the breeders have done, and you get some like amazing like red, burgundy fall color in there. And so if I had a favorite out there, I would say oak leaf hydrangea and a key way to identify this one has that oak shaped leaves. Yeah, that's my number one. I don't know. Does anyone here grow up oak leaf hydrangea? Candice, was that in your video?
It was. Yep. I love it. And I think one of my favorite things about it is that it will tolerate a little bit more shade than some of the other ones we'll look at today. So I actually have mine kind of tucked on the east side of the house and kind of in amongst the shade garden a little bit, which it's a great option for that.
It's definitely. Sorry.
Go ahead, Brian.
Definitely my favorite, Chris. Oak leaf hydrangea, and also from SIU. And it's a specific set of plants, like right on I guess it would be the east side of the ag building as you're going out towards Thompson.
As you walk
Woods.
Out the door, I know where you're talking. Yeah.
So I mean, it was those plants that really made me like start to appreciate, and they're big mature ones. Really made me start to appreciate that one. And yeah, so I like you. That's my favorite, I think, of all the hydrangeas. Although I do like about all of them.
They are amazing. I would say they can get rather big. So one of the ones that I have planted in recent years past is peewee. I think that's the correct cultivar name for that one. Peewee. So it's a little bit smaller, but after how long has it been? Almost 10 years in the yard. It's pretty big still. So, but still smaller than that straight species of Hydrangea quercifolia.
Nice.
Now, if I had to add, this is not necessarily the native one, but one that I know has been fairly traditional in a lot of homes is actually Hydrangea paniculata. And that probably, if your parents, grandparents grew something, you would have seen PG growing in their yards. So it's not like rated PG, it's actually PEEGEE. So that is a very traditional hydrangea that you've seen. And there's been a lot of breeding that has taken place in that Hydrangea paniculata realm there. And so I'd say probably one of the top ones on most people's lists from that is limelight. That is, I see that everywhere. All the nurseries, there's limelight hydrangea. And then for me, what I need in my yard, I need something a little smaller, and I'm always on the lookout for maybe dwarf type varieties, is little lime. So I grow little lime in my own yard. And so I really do like those as well. They're a little bit later to flower than a few of the others, but it's still an awesome one to have in the yard.
Yeah, totally agree. That's definitely one on the top of my list for sure.
Yeah.
So can you go ahead and describe the other two for us, Chris?
Sure. So there's also Hydrangea arborescens. And I know Ryan has had a recent article about that, I think, before, because that is where the famed Annabelle originates. So Hydrangea arborescens. Annabelle was actually discovered in Illinois, and I learned all this from Ryan's article, by the way. It was discovered in Illinois. It was grown wild in someone's garden. So this is another native-ish type shrub for us here in Illinois. And it's the one with the big white, just mop head type blooms. And that my mom has grown since I can remember. And Candice has a dried sample right there. I mean, these things can get humongous. The problem that I always remember growing up with is that they did not like anything. If it was wind, rain, it just flopped right over. And so there have been actually improvements in that exact same Annabelle. And so I think it's is it Invincibelle or Incredibelle, and it ends with bell or ball. So
I think it's ball. Yeah, Incredibelle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Incredible. Incredible, Invincibelle. They're all improvements to Annabelle. And so it's, again, it's a very traditional one that you would find in a lot of home landscapes for us. And that is another one of my favorites because I just so happened to grow up with that one.
Definitely.
Now, Kelly, the fourth one here. So we've done quercifolia, we've done paniculata, we've done arborescens, and now we're left with Macrophylla. Is that right? Am I on track here? Okay, so Macrophylla, this is the one that another good traditional one where people like to manipulate the flower color. So if it's pink or blue, or I like to keep mine confused in the purple. So yes, so you can manipulate your soil pH and kind of restrict aluminum to control that flower color with your hydrangea Macrophylla there. So and that would be, what are they? The big leaf hydrangeas. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we saw what's growing in Candice's yard, and now we know what's growing in Chris's yard. Ryan, what kind of hydrangeas are growing in your yard?
Well, I have a row of Annabelle that I transplanted from a family member's house, like right when we moved in 2017. And to match those, I've added Invincibelle, like on the other side, kind of on the other side of a sidewalk. They're on either side. So to me, it's kind of like a trial, like comparing the two or just seeing the difference. Where interestingly, I will put in a nice positive word for the transplantability of smooth hydrangea, because we had to have some geothermal put in our house, geothermal heat, and they had to excavate into the house somewhere. And guess where they had to do that? Right where I had just planted my Incrediballs, of course. So I dug up one of those things and horribly neglected it. This was in like December I dug it up. So I guess it was all during dormancy, but dug it up, let it sit there in my backyard, kind of with some leaves piled around the base of it, exposed roots and things. And then finally, it was like a month ago or something, after like grading got done and other things, we kind of let soil settle for a while. I went ahead and retransplanted that thing, and I'll be danged if it isn't totally leafing out right now and looks like nothing even happened to it. So, I mean, we'll see as the summer goes on if there's a little effect to it, but it almost looks like it's leafing out stronger than the ones that were in place, that have been there for a year. So I don't know if it helped it, but anyway, so I've got those two, and then I've got a couple of varieties of oak leaf, and I'm sorry I can't remember the second variety of oak leaf hydrangea I plant. And these are all kind of new plantings. I've just lived here since 2017. So all this is went in. Actually, this last oak leaf I planted was just last summer, and actually got, one thing about hydrangeas, at least oak leaf in my experience, deer and rabbit love them. They are, if you have a lot of deer pressure, they're really going to get hammered. And especially right now, like, gosh, when it starts to warm up, before we have a lot of stuff growing and there's those new shoots, like my oak leaf hydrangeas have, gosh, I should have got a picture of that. They're nice shoots coming out of that. I mean, that's like candy for deer. But over wintertime, that this new variety of oak leaf that I planted, I can't think of the name, just got almost eaten to the ground by rabbits. I didn't protect it. It's in a rabbity spot, kind of on the edge of a brushy area. But Ruby Red is the variety that I've had in the ground for a little while, and it's gaining some size. I do like the shadiness it can handle. So it's kind of in a spot where my house is casting shade. It's on the north side of the house and kind of half shade, kind of gets a little bit of late afternoon sun, a little tiny window because it's in a little pocket kind of my house. So yeah, that's the hydrangeas I've got in the landscape, and don't have any of the other two though, but not necessarily on purpose. Just how landscaping happens. Just kind of happens around your house.
Yeah, add it to your list, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, we've had a flood of questions come in, so I'm going to scroll back up here because we got a lot to chat through. I did see a comment asking for some visuals for all of these. We'll get in the comment box. Ryan has a great blog post, and we have a great handout on these 4 hydrangeas too that we'll get in the comment box for you, so you can click on that and open it up and read a little bit more. So let me scroll back up here. Paula had a comment. My plants are well established and one is huge. It used to bloom every year now, but in the last few years, no blooms. So she didn't say what particular type of hydrangea, but you want to touch on maybe pruning a little bit, and if like a rejuvenation or renewal pruning might help that situation? What do you guys think?
That's the number one problem. I know, Kelly, you were going to ask me that later, but when people call about hydrangeas, it's like, oh, hey, I hydrangea that looked beautiful when I bought it, planted it. Maybe it did good for a few years, looks terrible right now. There can be a few reasons for this. I mean, the first thing we should probably do is make sure that we can correctly identify the type of hydrangea, because that also helps to inform us when is it going to be setting flower buds, which then helps us to inform us about one, pruning time, and then maybe do we need to make sure that we're providing enough fertilizer or something during that time period when it would be forming those flower buds. But as a general rule of thumb, as Candice mentioned, some type of a rejuvenation cut. And I always say this to folks: if you have a shrub that you just are not happy with, cut it down. What do you have to lose? Not being happy with it just being cut down. I mean, so I always tell folks, if you have a plant that is not making you happy, cut it down. See if that improves it. See if you get flowering next year, or if it blooms on current year new wood, it blooms this year. I always tell folks, what do you have to lose? You're not happy with it now. If you cut it down and you're still not happy, you can dig it up and find something that would work better for that spot.
Okay, awesome. We'll try that out, Paula, and hopefully you'll get a reflush of bloom started. Okay, let's see. Natalie asks, what type of hydrangea do you recommend for north-facing medium light in Urbana? So I'm assuming kind of the north-facing side of the house. Also, what variety are the endless summer hydrangeas, and are they recommended? I know we wanted to touch on that. So you want to hit on the north-facing recommendation first?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just throw out there, in terms of what I have grown on the north-facing, sides of buildings and installed and things. Macrophylla works well. Quercifolia has also worked well. The main thing that I will add to this whole thing, though, is air circulation. So making sure you're spacing this far enough away from that structure that you get good airflow. Because in my neck of the woods with my Quercifolia, I get some foliar disease issues in central Illinois. I know it's an air circulation issue. I just know it. I just planted it too close to the building. So that is a problem. So making sure that you're spacing your plants correctly. That is the main thing I would advise. Is a lot of hydrangeas will work for this. Now, I would say most of the Native American Quercifolia and my brain blanking, Macrophylla, arborescens, those are a bit more tolerant of part shade conditions. Your others that you would find out in the paniculata, you can find those in kind of a brighter sunlight conditions. But as farther as you get in southern Illinois, and I know you're in Champaign, Urbana area, but the farther you get in southern Illinois, if you can give them some afternoon shade, that would be ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I have Annabelle. Those Annabelle and Incredible planting is on the north side of my house, and I guess the reason why I did that, it's kind of like a border planting, is just because they don't get very tall. They don't, I have windows there. They don't kind of block the window, so that's maybe something to think about as height. But I also have oak leaf on the north side of my house, where there's not a window, there's not anything, so it can get big and woolly. It can get huge if it wants to. So that's maybe the height consideration is maybe something to think about on the side of a house too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, I think I'd agree to Chris. The only one maybe I wouldn't recommend for a north would be the panicle, because I think it would survive and it would grow okay, but you're not going to get a good flower display in a shady spot with that one, which is kind of what you're growing it for. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a good tip. Okay, Now how about endless summer? Would we recommend endless summer?
Well, that is a Macrophylla. So I don't know how far into the story we want to go with this, but it was originally selected by Michael Durr in the Bailey Nurseries. He noticed in their lines and lines of hydrangea Macrophylla that there was one that had dried flowers and newly fresh blooming flowers. And so that means it was blooming on new and old wood, because traditionally Macrophylla just bloomed on the old wood, and you couldn't. There wasn't what's called remontancy, or I hope I'm saying that right. That's just a technical term that it blooms on old and new wood. So there was no such thing as a remontant hydrangea Macrophylla. So Durr discovered that. They put their stamp so that they could earn their royalties off of that. They propagated it. They had a fantastic marketing team as that plant was released in, was it like 2004 or 3? Or it was back then sometime.
Right in there.
Yeah. And it took the gardening industry by storm because we're all like, we want one of those. And then came the other name that it's known by, which Endless Summer is also kind of known as Endless Bummer, because they found that the flowering is not quite what the marketing team had, I think, were promising there. So Endless Summer, it kind of now defines more of a series of plants because they've made improvements on that cultivar that they found in the Bailey nursery. And so there's several new improved cultivars out there of Endless Summer. I know Blushing Bride, I think, is one of them. Going to mine my brain here. I'll be quiet for a second as I try to think of some new and improved ones. So yeah, any other things to add to Endless Summer?
That's good. Yeah. And if you hopped on the call earlier, or you can wait till the end and rewatch it, I shared in the video we shared at the beginning, I showed the Macrophylla in my landscape, and they came with the house. I've lived here for 5 years and I've never had a single bloom on them. So I have no idea what cultivar they are. I have a feeling they probably are Endless Summer or something very similar, but it's just a foliage shrub in my garden. So one of these days I'll probably dig them out and replace, but yeah, it's
Of course, since you're not happy, cut them down, Candice.
Just chop them.
I love that
recommendation.
So I did remember one of the other improved ones that in the trials they had them side by side, Endless Summer, and the other one was oh my goodness, keeps leaving my brain. It's not Invincibelle. It's Bloomstruck. That's it. Bloomstruck. Okay. They had those side by side. It's an improved type of Endless Summer in that same series. Looked a lot better in the trial gardens, at least. So Bloomstruck.
There you go. Okay, got it. Let's see. We had a follow-up question about Endless Summer. This person asked, I'm not sure if it is getting too much sun. The paperwork said morning sun, part shade. Does that mean full sun is not going to work? So for Macrophyllas, would you recommend full sun location?
Depends on the summer, really. I mean, and your microclimates on your site. I've seen some pretty harsh areas on full sun that the hydrangeas have been planted in. And you can see them kind of screaming at you a little bit as their leaves dry and crinkle up a little in that summer heat. If you're seeing some drought stress, some leaf scorch, so drying leaves that kind of crinkle and fall apart when you squeeze on them, it might be the wrong spot for them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would prefer, if it was in my yard, it would be like an east part of the yard where I get some full sun in the morning, some afternoon shade.
Yep. And it sounds like that's what they have. So that sounds like a good spot. And then one other follow-up question, we were talking about shade. Would any of these work in full shade? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I've had Annabelle in pretty full shade, and it's done okay.
Yeah. I'm thinking you'd probably have less of a flower display. I would guess in a more full shade location. Yeah. But
if you think of just native hydrangea arborescens, which is not as showy as Annabelle or any of the improved varieties, it occurs in full shade in a woodland, on a woodland stream bank, I guess is where I picture it in Southern Illinois. So, I mean, as a species, it can do well there. It can thrive and grow, but yeah, probably at the expense of flower display is what you're going to sacrifice.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Excellent questions. Let's see. We had a comment here from Janice. She wanted to thank us for helping her save her Thanksgiving cactus. She cut out all the dead stuff and she's given it a lot of love, and it's doing good. So glad to hear that, Janice. Always good to save a houseplant. Let's see. A couple other questions here. Liz asked, I'm interested in planting a hydrangea hedge. It's on the north-facing border. What would you suggest? So we've already kind of talked about north-facing. And would you say kind of all of these would be good kind of planted in a row to form kind of a hedge type of planting?
Pictured in my mind is Ryan's, what he describes with Annabelle and Invincible and all those. The newer improved varieties of the Annabelles, which would be Invincible and a few others, those are not necessarily bred for flowers. They are more bred for strong stems so they don't flop over. So that those improved varieties of arborescens would probably make, I think it would make a good hedge. Ryan, do you think that in your yard it works out?
Oh, I agree. I mean, my Annabelles, they kind of want to flop over, and so I've kind of put like a random stake in there and spot, I've tried to mess with them a little bit, but for the most part, like I just kind of let them do it, and don't worry about it. But I think the improved varieties, it would be nice. I can't wait for my, Incredible little row there to kind of mature and get a little bigger to see the difference, hopefully see some stronger stems holding up. But I think it'd be a nice setting for a row of those, and over time they just kind of all grow together. You can't even tell in my Annabelle patch now, 5 years post planting or so, you can't even hardly tell where an individual plant is. It's just a line of hydrangea foliage. So works nicely when it closes in.
If I could just put another plug in for good spacing, the limelight that we have here at the extension office is taller than the building right now. It's huge. It's in a perfect spot for it, and it loves where it's at. And we have to hack it down every single year because it just gets humongous. So I know a lot of people like to put just hedges in straight rows, but if you could stagger or do a triangular spacing, that gives the plant a little bit more room. And if one should die, which they do, it doesn't necessarily interfere with your hedge scheme. So
good tip. Yeah, if you had more of that full sun location, I love the look of a panicle hydrangea border. Man, it's when it's in flower, it's a showstopper. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Lots of good questions. Jackie asked, planning to get a hydrangea tree, which will be on the east side of the house, but gets at least 6 to 7 hours of morning sun. There was an oak tree there previously. Do you think it will grow there? So she's saying hydrangea tree, which I'm imagining is probably a panicle. Usually those I'm assuming they're grafted hydrangea trees, usually a panicle. So what would you say?
I'd say, yeah. I mean, we're talking 6 hours of sunlight, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, in morning sun, I think that's kind of what we're describing in some of these situations too. So, other thoughts, Chris or Kelly? I don't know.
I would say give it a try. The success and failures of plants is definitely making sure that we're selecting the plant, put it in the right location. It's also in how we plant them. So making sure that remove those circling roots, do a good inspection of that root ball before you plant it. A lot of people love to put landscape fabric down, but please keep the fabric on yourself. Don't put it out in the landscape. Avoid that. Do a good, generous mulch around the plant, an organic-based mulch that decomposes that organic matter back to the soil, and do not mount it up against the trunk of that hydrangea. And I have seen a few cases where those tree hydrangeas, they may not establish quite very well, and then you get sprouts from below the graft line. And so you don't necessarily want those. So you pull it out.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to hop over to YouTube. We've got a couple of questions there. You guys are killing it with the questions today. Question here, what soil do hydrangeas typically prefer? Will they do well in a low spot that will stay damp after a rain? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think that probably a little too much moisture could be an issue. I definitely see spots where they dry out a little too much, or they need maybe a little bit of watering, where there's maybe too much sun, too much evaporation. But I don't think that, correct, you guys throw in your thoughts, but I don't think they're going to do too well with like really heavy, wet soils. I think it's like kind of like that well-drained soil that can hold some moisture, that has some organic matter to kind of hold moisture, but be well-drained, I think is what we're really going for with most of these plants.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd say if you anything, again, spacing is important in those situations, that you're not crowding plants. And then if you can build up that soil, I'm not a huge advocate for putting berms all over the yard, but adding some soil, some wood mulch and things to help build up that soil. So at least the root zone is not going to be sitting entirely in water.
Okay, awesome. And Ryan, I imagine you probably have a suggestion for an area. Would you have another shrub suggestion?
Just another shrub to suggest for a area that's
native in particular.
Shady. Oh gosh, I'd probably suggest spice bush, but people will make fun of me for that. But,
I was just about to make fun of you for that. That's a good one.
I mean, Kelly loves her fothergillia.
Yeah, that would be good too.
So
button bush.
That's always my go-to for somewhat shaded shrub.
There we go. I knew you'd have something, Ryan. Okay, another one here. For the big leaf hydrangeas that bloom on old wood, when is the best time to prune? Mine also seem to have no to very few blooms. Could it be bud winter damage or not enough fertilizer?
Both. Yes.
Yeah.
Possibly. So making sure there's a few things you can do, making sure that we're thinking about mulch, how we are treating the soil there for those plants. So it's never necessarily a bad thing to add a little bit of compost, things like that in the off season, the winter months. That just adds a little bit of organic matter. And then making sure if possible, you can apply some type of a balanced type fertilizer or some type of organic fertilizer that contains a whole smattering of nutrients for these plants in the summer months. If they're blooming on old wood, that means they're setting their buds in the late summer months. So they need that soil nutrition at that time period. And if necessary, it depends on the winds of your property there. Are they exposed to excessive winter winds? Then that could be a problem too.
Excellent. And definitely check out that blog link and that handout link we put in the comments. We've got it broken down really well in that handout about when to prune specific hydrangea. So definitely check that out. Okay, keeping with the big leaf hydrangea discussion, Karen asks, how do I make the soil more acidic to change the bloom color of my hydrangea? You curse it and make it angry, and then it turns just gross. No. So turning soil acidic, I always recommend before you do anything with your soil pH is to get a soil test, because you want to know where you're starting with when you are adding any kind of soil amendment, no matter what you're doing. Everything else is just guessing. So to turn soil more acidic, you could add something like a some type of sulfur base with a little bit of, I think, is that when we want to add a little aluminum? So aluminum sulfate for that case? Yeah. So. Yeah.
And that will get you your blue flower heads for your Macrophylla.
Yeah. For like blueberries, I always, in the spring, you do your 4 ounces of ammonium sulfur. And then maybe it's different for hydrangeas, right? Because it's aluminum. But I always tell people take a soil test, because the ammonium sulfate it's a bit expensive. And you can actually use elemental sulfur in the fall, but it takes a longer time to break down. And soil tests, they will give you recommendations, and they'll tell you how long it's going to take. They'll say for the next 3 years, apply this, this, and this. And so they really give great recommendations.
A lot of times even help you with the rate at which you're supposed to apply. It is really helpful, some of those reports.
Yeah, and good point also about this is not a quick process. So don't put down your soil amendment and expect that your flower colors are going to be changing in like overnight. It could take a few years for that results to show.
And, depending on where you're starting at, you could have quite a ways to go to get that blue color. I see a lot of urban soil tests come in at 8. Kelly, what do we test? We planted an oak by your office. I forget what that soil test was. Wasn't it like 8.2 or something? I can't remember now. I'd have to go back and look, but I see them high 7s, 8 a lot of times. And so, to get that blue color, you're going to need to lower it down to 6 or maybe down into the 5s to really get the solid blue. So that's quite a bit. So you'll have to be a little patient with that. And don't worry if it's taken some time, as long as you're gaining some progress. It just takes time to acidify the soil. So give it a couple seasons.
Clearly why Chris's favorite Macrophyllas are the purple ones.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want to do the work.
Right.
I am not too concerned. I'm happy that I get flowers and healthy plants.
That's what I would say. I'd be a happy dance to do is actually flowering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Let's see. Andy had a comment. He's got nice 4-foot tall green on his backyard hydrangeas. He thinks they're Annabelles that he didn't cut down to the ground for the first time this year. Excellent. So trying something different this year. Andy, you'll definitely get a bigger sized hydrangea this year without the pruning, but you can definitely do that. Let's see. Question from Sandra. I moved into my home in 2017. There's a hydrangea at the rear of the house. It gets moderate sun. It gets beautiful and leafy, but it's never bloomed. I left it alone the first year, pruned it the fall one year, and pruned it in the spring another. It still has not bloomed. Any ideas? I think it's an old-fashioned one, maybe Nico Blue or something like that. I'm not familiar with Nico Blue, but I would guess this is a big leaf that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely confirm the ID.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've planted Nico Blue when I did landscaping, but I have no good advice on this one. So I have myself never grown it and never had to necessarily deal with issues on it. But yes, we'll confirm ID. We could do something like that. And I always tell folks, if you're just completely frustrated with your blooms, just again, that rejuvenation cut could be the thing to do. Or even a renewal pruning. So some of the older stems, so you just prune some of those out. And when we heard that Annabelle one that didn't get pruned down, that's another possible thing that you can do is you just prune out some of the older, larger stems, get rid of the dead, and then making sure that you're applying some type of a fertilizer feeding during the time when it should be setting buds, which again, we need to confirm the type.
So we could probably talk for a minute just about what might preclude flower buds from forming. And I mean, Chris, you described kind of that rejuvenation pruning or renew. I forget which is which now, renewal or rejuvenation, but the pruning where we're taking out a third of the older stems. Mm-hmm. So in that case, what we've done is, focus some younger growth into the shrub canopy because we've opened up some light in there. So that's something that can limit flower bud productivity, the amount of light reaching those stems. So, by opening it up a little bit, we're, adding some light to that canopy. We're also promoting some younger, more vigorous stems that maybe have are more likely to produce more flower buds. So, another thing that I think of with hydrangeas is cold and, exposed, like in an exposed spot, perhaps the cold is, limiting that flower bud production or killing some flower buds over the wintertime. I'm trying to think, what are some of the other factors that limit bud production? I mean, we talked about cold, light, health of the overall health of the plant, I guess. If you had just a not super healthy plant,
and your microclimates can exacerbate those issues like cold, heat, light. So if you plant this next to a brick wall surrounded by rock, mulch, that's pretty inhospitable, I think, for any plant, but, especially hydrangea. So I get questions quite a bit. People send photos of, here's my hydrangea. It's not blooming. It's surrounded by rock mulch. It's got brick walls, a brick patio or concrete drive and sidewalk all around. It's like, it's not a good spot for plants in general. So yet your microclimates can also play a role in your individual properties.
Mm-hmm. And couldn't over-fertilization cause too much vegetative growth at the expense of flowers?
Yep. Yes, it could.
Great point.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, gotcha. Hopefully that'll help you out a little bit there. Let's see, another one. I bought Twist and Shout. I'm not familiar with that one, but maybe one of you guys are. Just took a peek and the old wood looks dead, but lots of new growth. Just cut out the old and let it go. That's our question. Should just cut out the old. Is that a Macrophylla? Anybody?
Yeah, Twist and Shout is an improved variety of endless summer. It's actually a lace cap type.
Gotcha.
Usually I see them as blue.
Okay.
I see them.
But yeah, that's exactly what you would do. That's what I do every spring.
Mm-hmm.
I wait till my non-blooming Macrophylla kind of leaves up so I can see how much of it was killed back from the winter, and then just cut out the areas that don't green up essentially. So yeah, you got it. And then cross your fingers for for flowers. Let's see. Dolly had a comment. I usually cut my arborescens down every other year. Keeps them strong. That's a good pattern to follow. Let's see. I have several different hydrangea. Is there a good online source to help me determine what type of hydrangeas I have? And Kelly, did you have some pictures you were putting together? Do you want to maybe show that now? That might help us kind of distinguish.
I do, but with guidance from Chris, he wanted me to show people pictures of leaves in my handout. That way they can further identify them. So
perfect.
If you don't know how to identify your hydrangea, please look at Ryan's blog and look for my handout at the bottom, and that will help you ID them. But yes, I do have a few, but it's not, particularly of the leaves. So
that's okay. We can chat. We can maybe talk through them too.
Okay.
Yeah, we were chatting about this earlier and talking about how to ID, and my comment was sometimes you just wait till it flowers, and that's going to give you the most accurate information on a lot of these. But the leaves can definitely be helpful.
One moment.
Yeah, just make her full screen there.
Okay, so this is a snowflake. This was taken by all of our favorite horticulture educator from the South, Elizabeth.
Beautiful.
And this is the hydrangea. Oak leaf hydrangea, right? Oak leaf.
Yeah.
You see those beautiful oak leaves. And this is the foliage that Ryan. Are we sure we want me to lead this?
You got it.
Somebody on this call said something about it.
That Chris loves because of the beautiful fall color. And It is, agreed, beautiful fall color. This is actually a little post that I made about panicled hydrangeas. And this was at the Idea Garden in Champaign on campus. Well, not really the Idea Garden, a little bit further out, but I don't know what kind it is, but man, those are some huge, beautiful blooms.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
And feel free to add anything, you guys.
You're looking good.
This is actually is in a master gardener project in one of my counties, and it's called Hydrangea Bobo. And it's a panicled one, and it stays really short and compact. Now, they've had some success. They actually had 3, and one of them died out, which is why there's such a difference in the size of these 2 plants right next to each other. But the ones that survived did really well and look really beautiful in the landscape.
Nice.
This is Ryan's picture of Annabelle. This is the arborescens, right, guys?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, I personally see Annabelles all over my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And they tend to be, for me, what I've always noticed about them is if I see them drooping or wilting, I know it's time to water my garden. They're my indicator plant.
Yeah, I can watch mine go from in the morning not having wilty leaves to like by afternoon. It's like every day they go through that change, where as it gets hot, they kind of start to look a little wilted. They start to kind of fold a little bit. You can tell on arborescens, the leaves really tell you before they die or anything. They start to tell you.
And so I couldn't find an official picture of Macrophylla, right? Macrophylla, bigleaf. But that's why I wanted to show the kind of purplish and pinkish here. You can see it might be struggling with the pH a little bit. I guess the fact that we don't have pictures might give you a clue. This is not a horticulturist go-to. This tends to be the one that requires work. So, I mean, if you want a sustainable landscape, I personally wouldn't choose this one. If you're having fun and experimenting and want to, put a little bit more work in, then this is the one for you.
Well, so it's interesting, though. I think, tell me if you guys agree. I think this is what I see the most at nurseries, though, is big leaf hydrangea,
Yeah.
And it does, to me, seems like out of the list, the one that maybe could be the pickiest. I don't know.
Yeah. But I can see why, because it's beautiful, especially if it's in flower at the garden center, people eat it up because it's just so beautiful. But once you get it in the landscape that next year, it's hard to replicate what you bought. Yeah.
Because, I used to be a greenhouse grower, right? And so I used to do florist hydrangeas. And so, Candice does a lot of this with her cut flowers using florist hydrangeas. And so I was very careful in the greenhouse how I treated my hydrangeas through fertilizer, through the ammonia sulfur, and even elemental sulfur that I might have used. And even I was very picky about the pH of my water. I actually injected acid in my water to get particular colors. So, but that's a greenhouse grower. Let them do all the work.
Well, that's kind of a good point, though, on the pH of your water. And, I've had issues with this with blueberries where well water is pretty basic compared to, if you have surface water through city water. So knowing your water source can kind of help you with this too, where I felt like in some blueberry plantings, and I had a neighbor that had an issue with this too, our well water was kind of working against our acidity we were adding over time to kind of influence it. So that's something to think about. If you're really trying to acidify and you're on a well, you probably have really basic water. Also, if your municipal source is from groundwater, you would have probably more basic water, where I'd say on a public water supply, they probably do a little bit more to, buffer and treat that water possibly. But it pays to know, understand where your water's coming from. Surface water is going to be a little more acidic if it's coming out of a lake or a reservoir. Groundwater is going to be a little more basic. So
nice. That's a good tip. Awesome. Well, hopefully that will help you identify what you have there. The other thing you can always do too is reach out to our master gardeners. You can reach out to your local extension office and send a picture to their master gardener help desk or hotline, or even bring in a sample later in the year, and they'd be able to help you identify too. Definitely. Okay, Sharon asked, what hydrangea would you recommend for a west side with mid to late afternoon sun till dusk? And she wants lots of blooms.
I think that leads us more in towards the paniculatas.
Yeah, that's what I would go with too. That would be more of a full sun side of the landscape.
Yep, those lime lights and little limes, they're people love them. So
can't go wrong. Okay, let's see. Paula asked to follow up. When is the best time to cut it down? So she had one that didn't bloom, so we recommended she cut it to the ground. What about timing for that? What would you recommend?
Well, so this comes back to the spring flowering versus summer flowering question, correct? Yeah. So for the spring flowering shrubs that, they're going to have those flower buds through winter and they're going to flower right away in the spring, you probably, if you're worried about preserving that bloom, you'd probably want to do it right after they flower. So in the summertime, whereas with summer flowering shrubs, they grow those flower buds after the growing season starts. you'd want to do that in wintertime in dormancy, and kind of like I always mention on this, this is all designed around flowering, this pruning recommendation of right after it flowers, prune it. If you've got if you're thinking about plant health, pruning during dormancy or cutting that plant down during dormancy is going to have the least impact on plant health. Where when we do that in the summertime, right after they flower, that's probably taking a bite out of the plant's health a little bit. But we do that because we want the flower buds. So I'm always trying to, if I can at all, even if I'm going to sacrifice a flower display, if I have a plant that I'm worried about, I try and do that during wintertime, regardless of the bloom time or what I'm going to do to flower buds, just if I'm worried about the health. So that would be a health concern, would maybe force me to always do it in winter. But
yes. So let's say you had an Annabelle or a panicle and it's at this stage right now. It's leafing out. Now, obviously, I'm going to come in and I'm going to prune out these old flowers because I haven't done it yet because I'm wanted to save this for the show. I'll use that as my excuse. But let's say we're giving this recommendation to prune and start over. If they had one at this stage, would you recommend just waiting till next winter at this point? Are you going to cause a lot of harm if you go in at this stage and do some pruning? What would be your suggestion?
Well, so you're talking about pruning it to the ground at that stage?
Yeah, let's say that.
Well, so in that case, you're probably going to hurt that shrub quite a bit because it's pumped a lot of resources into all those leaves. And until those leaves can get fully developed and it can start to photosynthesize and gain some of that energy back, you're slicing off a big investment from the roots in that above ground growth. So yeah, this would be a stressful time for that newly kind of leafing out plant to have the top growth removed. So,
okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted people to hear that in case they're thinking about trying that.
Now, when we're talking about though, just removing those kind of dead, spent, old flower heads from last year, I just did that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we're good.
So there. Don't sweat that. That's not a big deal. That's not a big impact. But boy, to cut the plant to the ground, that's a drastic shock, and you really want to kind of play the game of when am I going to take away the least amount of energy if you're worried about plant health. If you've got a healthy shrub, gosh, they grow like shrubs. You can do a lot of things to a healthy shrub. That's why Chris's recommendation, I love it, of just, if you're not happy with it, cut the thing to the ground. Most shrubs grow so vigorously when they're healthy, they can handle that and just grow right out of it. Bounce back twice the size the next year, it almost seems like on a healthy one. So,
but if she's not happy with it, you don't want her to cut it to the ground right now. You want her to wait till late winter next year to cut it to the ground.
Yeah, that would probably be the best with respect to plant health.
Unless you're like, if it dies, it dies. I don't.
Yeah, unless you really kind of don't care.
Yeah.
I'd say if right now that's on your mind and you're really dying to do it, if you could let those plants leaf out and photosynthesize for a little while and time that for like a little bit later in summer, that's probably going to have a little less impact. Because they're able to photosynthesize with those leaves they used energy to generate and gain a little bit of that energy back before you cut it off. So, but I'd say right now is a pretty stressful time to do that.
I'd agree with that. And if a rejuvenation cut for you later on in the growing season or in the winter is too much for you, again, that renewal pruning where you just remove a third of that older growth, that might just be the thing that plant needs to get a little bit more airflow, light, and devote a bit more energy to other parts of the plant.
And, I lean more towards that, the pruning out of a third or so, like just as opposed to the drastic cut to the ground thing. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I just in my own, I like to spend the time meticulously kind of picking out that third where, if time's a thing, like one cut at the ground is a lot easier too, a lot of times, but I don't know, it's some of it's personal opinion too on how you prefer to do that, but they both kind of get to the same end goal as a management strategy. It's just probably with pruning out of a third, you're going to do that a little more often than cutting it to the ground. You could do every 2 or 3 years or something and get the same result. So,
well, I think the other thing I love about these too is that they don't necessarily have to be pruned. Like if you have the space to let it grow and you want a big lush hydrangea, you don't have to prune. Besides pruning off these old flowers, that's all I'm going to do to these, because they're only a couple years old at this stage, and I want to let them get big and kind of fill out that area. So that's one way I love them, because they're less maintenance in that way, I find.
And I'll just add, part of my pruning program is a little treat to myself, some cut flowers. So during the actual growing season, if you have flowers, please treat yourself and cut those off, bring them into the dining room table, enjoy them, dry them out for the fall. There's a lot of fun things you can do with hydrangea blooms.
Well, yeah, I've kind of counted that as like some of my thinning pruning too. If you're going to take this flower head off, maybe take that back down into the bottom of the shrub, and then you've kind of opened up an area right there. Yeah, I love that.
Most definitely.
Oh, no, you mentioned something. Candice, give us some quick tips on how to cut our hydrangea flowers.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So any of these make pretty great flowers, which is awesome. So the best time to cut those is going to be either in the morning or in the evening. That's when they're going to be full of the most water and kind of not stressed by the heat of the day. So you're going to cut those stems as long as you desire. Just kind of depends what you're wanting. And then in terms of good pruning practice, you always want to cut to where you have a branch union. So I'm not going to cut in the middle of this and just leave this bare nub here. I'm going to cut back to here, and then I can enjoy this stem here. I'm going to strip off any foliage that I'm going to put in my vase. So the stem should be nice and clean to put in that vase. And then, just keep them cool. You can put flower food in that water to keep them nice and fresh. Change out that water frequently, and you should have good luck. The other cool thing you can do with hydrangeas, if you've ever had one that just kind of wilts over, you put it in a vase and it just wilts. What we would recommend, whether you get it in a flower arrangement or you cut it yourself from the garden, take that stem out, give it a fresh cut at the base of the stem, and then fill your sink or your bathtub with water, and lay that stem horizontal. So just lay it in that water in the sink, give it a fresh cut. And what happens a lot of times is that there's an air bubble in the stem, and that's what caused that stem to wilt. So if you lay it horizontal, it allows that air bubble to move out. It allows water to move in, and the flower head will actually absorb water too. So burying that flower head in water can also help rehydrate it. So just a tip, if you ever get a wilted one in an arrangement, a lot of times you can revive it if it's not too far gone.
Yeah, great tip.
That's a really good tip. I had to use that tip one time.
Yeah.
I was doing a wedding and all of my hydrangeas wilted the morning of the wedding.
Yeah. Yikes.
And so I had to go through and do that particular thing to all my hydrangeas.
And they perk back up, right?
They did. They did wonderful.
Nice. Excellent. Okay, let's see. Final call on questions. We've got a couple minutes left. Amy asked, any experience with Invincibelle Wee White or Mini Mauvette? Anybody have any experience with those?
I don't, but I would say for most consumers that are buying plant material, it is those dwarf types, the wee white, little lime, peewee, all of these, because most of our houses are getting bigger and our yards are getting smaller, and so we need smaller shrub material. Now, there are some of us who are getting larger yards and such, and so we could have larger shrubs, but for the most part, on the market, you're going to find a lot of dwarf type shrubs, but unfortunately, no, that don't have a experience with those particular cultivars.
Yeah, I don't those particular ones either, but yeah,
I mean, as somebody that wants to add a lot of shrubs, though, I find myself starting to kind of seek out a lot of the dwarf varieties and things.
That's what I do.
So I have room for another one next to it,
Right.
I just planted little quick fire in my yard just because it was dwarf and I needed a smaller shrub.
Nice. Okay, cool. So we'll finish it off. We've got two other gardening questions, non-hydrangea related. We had one come in ahead of time about an apple tree. So Andrea has an apple tree that shows signs of round-headed borers, or whatever they're called, some type of borer, it sounds like. There are holes all over the trunk of our tree, and the bark seems to be shredding off. Might you ask your team if the only remedy at this point is to get rid of the tree? And if so, how do we get rid of the wood to prevent infestation of other deciduous fruit trees? So Kelly, this is an insect one for you. Any recommendation on borers in apple trees or borers in general?
I have to wonder though if it could be sapsucker, like peck marks.
It's
if
quite
you're seeing
possible.
like that profuse
There's
of
a bunch.
Yeah.
But I'm worried about the bark sloughing off. That's when I heard that, I'm like, oh, that's not good.
Right. Well, and we talk about this a lot. A lot of times signs of a borer damage or borers moving in is a secondary issue. The tree was already declining, likely from an environmental issue or a disease problem. It could be other things. And then when the tree is stressed, we tend to have borer problems coming in too.
One thing I will say about fruit trees is I'm pretty quick to cut them down if they're not doing great. Right. And I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just, to me, it's exciting to plant something new too. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you should feel bad about that if it's really looking bad. I mean, if it's lost a third of its canopy, that's a good sign that it's on its way out. And maybe that's a plant to restart on.
Yeah, and I would say just tips for moving forward is just try to maintain that tree as healthy as possible through watering, pest and disease management. There's not much you can do to prevent borer moving in besides just keeping the tree healthy, I would say. Yeah. Okay, excellent question. And then we're going to finish it off with this. This is a great timely question. Not hydrangea related. My rhubarb shows no signs of harm from the frost. There's no wilting or color change. Do I still need to remove and pitch the leaves and stalks, or will the stalks be safe to use? So this is something we posted on social media a couple days ago. The fact that if the rhubarb gets frosted, we recommend you do not use it. So what do you think if there's no signs of damage?
I think if it looks fine otherwise, it's fine. I think you would see, I mean, correct, weigh in on this, guys, but I think you would see wilted leaves. You'd see a flimsy stem, like the actual stalk we eat would kind of lose some turgidity because it's been damaged as well. And that's where you have the potential toxicity, where if it looks unscathed, just because it was exposed to colder temperature, I don't think that's a reason to cut it off. But I don't know if you all have different experiences or different thoughts.
What you guys?
I just remember what Martha wrote. She was like, when in doubt, don't use it.
That's probably good.
But I agree with Ryan. I mean, usually you're not doubting if you got damage. If it doesn't show damage, it probably isn't damaged.
You may want to give it a day or two here too to make sure there's not some kind of lagging behind a little. But I don't know. I mean, I guess if we're talking about it this much, and there's some doubt, maybe it is best to just start over. But anything new that grows after this would not have any danger with consumption. So
cut back and wait for the next flush. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, you guys had amazing questions today. A lot of great conversation about hydrangea. We knew this would be a hot topic because we get questions about it all the time. So Chris, thanks for being with us and answering those hard questions. We appreciate it. Our next show, everybody's going to be in 2 weeks on May 6th, and it's going to be a special Mother's Day episode where Kelly and Ryan and I are going to have our moms with us on the show. So we're going to have some more special guests for Mother's Day. I think we're going to talk about spring flowering bulbs and summer bulbs and just flowers and lots of great Mother's Day stuff. Don't forget too about our Facebook group, the Extension Horticulture Facebook group. We'll get that in the comments too. If you do have questions between shows, that's a great place to get answers. So thanks everybody. And thanks, Chris. And we will see everybody again in 2 weeks.